All right, welcome everyone. My name is Chris Murphy. I have the honor of representing Connecticut in the United States Senate. As usual, I'm joined here today by my partner in the Senate, Dick Blumenthal, and we're also glad to be joined here by Chief Don Anderson, who heads up the Darien Police Department and also is representing the Connecticut Police Chiefs Association as well. We are here today to talk about a success story, the first bipartisan piece of gun safety legislation passed in 30 years through Congress. That bill was passed last summer. Throughout the rest of 2022, the administration was hard at work to implement the bill. The bill has been fully operational since January of this year. And with 3 months of full implementation behind us, we now have some data and some statistics to share about how successful this bill has been just in the first few months in keeping our country safer. But we know we have a lot more work to do, as evidenced by this country being seized by another mass shooting in Nashville, Tennessee. Every single one of these mass shootings is heartbreaking, especially for us in Connecticut who know what it's like to go through these tragedies. But to look at the pictures of these teachers and these beautiful young children, to have those lives snuffed out in an instant, it's unacceptable that we continue to allow this to happen in this country. And so what we did last summer is important. It's a paradigm shifting moment where finally we start to change the laws of this country to reflect the will of the American public. 90% of Americans want these common sense changes that we made. And I think you will see our ability to continue to deliver more change. Republicans and Democrats working together to make that change this year and in the coming years. So let me just talk a little bit about some of the data that we're releasing today and then turn it over to Senator Blumenthal and Chief Anderson. First, I want to talk about a new statute that penalizes, for the first time at the federal level, gun traffickers and straw purchasers. The reality is most of the guns that are used in Connecticut, just a stone's throw away from here in Hartford, aren't bought in Connecticut. Because in Connecticut, it's really hard to buy a gun if you're a criminal. We have universal background checks in this state, but other states don't. And so what ends up happening is gun traffickers buy weapons in the black market in South Carolina or Georgia or Ohio, and then they traffic them to Connecticut with the intent of selling them illegally in Connecticut. Now, that wasn't a federal crime until last summer. I don't know why, but it wasn't. Now, federal prosecutors can bring cases against gun trafficking rings. And already, since the passage of this law, we have had 30 cases where people and individuals and groups have been charged under federal law with gun trafficking and straw purchases. Those cases have seized over 200 guns from traffickers and straw purchasers, and this is a very good start. Finally, we have the ability to use federal law to go after these gun traffickers that are bringing guns to our state, to the cities in our state. And I am very glad to see these cases begin. The second thing that this bill did was to put in place a new process, a new background check for under 21 buyers. Unfortunately, the profile of the modern mass shooter is pretty consistent. The shooter in Tennessee was a little bit older, but many of these shooters are 18, 19, 20 years of age. Many of them buy the gun shortly before they commit the crime, as did the Uvalde shooter. So on a bipartisan basis, we put into place a new background check for these young buyers in which we go to extra lengths to make sure that they are ready to own a firearm. And that extra check means that no young person now walks out of a gun store with a gun. There's a 5 to 10 day waiting period. Well, we conduct that additional background check. Now, that 5 to 10 day waiting period is important in and of itself because a lot of young people in crisis shouldn't be getting the gun immediately. Sometimes that 5 to 10 days is enough to let that crisis pass. But already this year, we have denied 119 attempted gun purchases by young buyers who had prohibited records on their file that were only caught by this new enhanced background check. It's really important. 119 young buyers who were in crisis or had a serious recent interaction with the criminal justice system were stopped from buying guns because of this enhanced background check. And then lastly, we have begun to help states adopt and implement red flag laws. So under the law, we have almost $1 billion that will go out to states to help them pass and implement red flag laws. And the federal government has already sent out the first round of those awards. $231 million has been given out to 49 states and territories to help them implement or pass red flag laws. Connecticut has a red flag law, but not everybody knows about it. Not every police officer on the beat knows how to use the red flag law. Not every parent, not every social worker knows that in Connecticut you can temporarily take guns away from somebody who's in crisis. This money will help Connecticut educate everybody who needs to know about our red flag law. And maybe this money will be the incentive for other states who don't have red flag laws to pass them. Tennessee does not have a red flag law. We're just starting to get the details of this shooting, but it's possible that if Tennessee had a red flag law, the guns could have been taken away from this individual before this crime was committed. And so our belief is that this new money will incentivize states to start passing their own red flag laws in states that don't have them. So we wanted to get this information out there this week because I know there's a lot of people who see these shootings and think about the safety of their children and wonder whether Congress is going to ever get their act together. I'm not saying what we did last summer solves the problem. It doesn't, but it shows the path forward where both parties can work together to deliver change that actually saves lives. And these statistics prove that what we did last summer, just a step in the right direction, is already saving lives in this country. So let me turn it over to Senator Blumenthal.
Thanks. Let me thank Chief Anderson and all the police that he represents, local police, our state police. We're fortunate in Connecticut to have the best policing in the United States. And it's because of professionals like Chief Anderson who are out there day in and day out and often are outgunned by criminals who have assault weapons and crime guns that are brought from other states. This measure is about more effective law enforcement. The Safer Communities Act was bipartisan. Let me just say again, bipartisan. The takeaway today is these laws work. These laws work. They take away not a single gun from a law-abiding citizen. No law-abiding citizen has lost a single gun as a result of these measures, but there has been real and tangible progress toward making America safer, just in the first few months. These numbers tell a story about public safety, but also about supporting law enforcement in the dangerous, deeply dangerous work that they do, often against crime guns, assault weapons, firearms that no legitimate recreational gun owner would welcome or even condone. So we're here talking about success, but there's no reason for a victory lap because the shooting in Nashville reminds us how much work remains to be done. And all of us who heard that morning about that shooting, about the senseless loss of children, had to be reminded of what we went through with Sandy Hook and how that trauma is going to last a lifetime for that community, not just for the families directly involved. Just as Sandy Hook affected us here in Connecticut, and still does, still with us, still with those families. And so the story today is not just about temporary success, but of how we need to build on that success. These laws work, and other laws will do even more, and in fact, must do more to make us safer in America. We almost included in that Safer Communities Act a version of Ethan's Law, safe storage. Used to be the policy of the gun lobby. Just as an example, it can make us safer, and now they oppose it. A ban on assault weapons, a ban on high-capacity magazine, a ban on ghost guns. We have an agenda to go forward talking about this success and how these laws work without taking away a single gun from any law-abiding citizen. I'm particularly proud of the red flag provisions in this law. I've championed this idea for years. It's been bipartisan. My partner in this effort was, of all people, Senator Lindsey Graham of South Carolina. And if you just take Connecticut, just Connecticut, in 2022, in the first 5 months in 2022, there were 96 instances of people separated from guns when they were about to harm themselves or others. People who were dangerous to themselves or others, 96 times in the first 5 months. Between June and November of 2022, those 5 months, the number increased to 415, a dramatic increase in the use of red flag laws here in Connecticut because awareness was raised. People use the law. And increased use of the law makes absolutely necessary the funds that now are available because our police need that help. They need more resources. They need support to implement a law on a greater scale that helps save lives. Literally 415 times people were separated from guns when they were dangerous to themselves or others, in part because that law was changed so that families could go directly to court when they saw a loved one that was about to harm themselves or others. And here is the tragic truth about those 415 instances. A lot of them were potential suicides. In fact, more than half. That's the story of gun violence in America. More than half of all gun deaths are suicides. We are saving people from killing themselves with this new law. And crisis intervention, incentive to adopt these red flag laws, resulted in $231 million going across the country. Every single state has received some money to implement crisis intervention. And that is major progress. So this is, as we've said from the beginning, progress against gun violence is not a sprint, it's a marathon. It is one step after the other, 1 foot after another. And we know in Connecticut, here's what I will say finally, we know in Connecticut these laws work. We are ahead of the rest of the country. These laws work as we have shown the nation in Connecticut. What won't work for our nation is continued inaction, complicity by Congress in these mass shootings, and the one-by-one killings that occur every day across our country, whether it's in Hartford or New Haven or Stamford or in rural or suburban areas. No area is immune. It is a national public health menace and epidemic. And that's why continued progress is so important. Chief Anderson, thank you for being here.
Glad to be here. I bring you greetings from the Fairfield County region. It's an anomaly when a Fairfield County chief appears here at the Capitol. Even more so when a small suburban police chief appears here at the Capitol here in Hartford. But that doesn't underscore the fact that Connecticut chiefs from across the board, from Darien to Danielson or Watertown to Waterford, we are committed to having safe communities here in Darien here in the state of Connecticut. The fact that I can come here and speak with our senators today, and we're looking at the bipartisan, that's the first thing that jumps out at me. This was a bipartisan action, safer communities. The 4 words that are there kind of underscore why I was happy to come here today on behalf of the Connecticut Chiefs of Police. The fact that we've had ongoing dialogue with our senators and their ability and their willingness to meet with the Connecticut chiefs has not gone unnoticed. I welcome that, and I know my fellow chiefs do as well. The bipartisan thrust of this bill, we certainly know that we need more of this in Washington and here in the state of Connecticut on all matters that are impacting public safety. I just want to underscore the fact that the Connecticut Police Chiefs Association supports all reasonable efforts at all levels of government to prevent gun violence in all our cities and towns. We are in full support of all reasonable background checks and all efforts that must be grounded. Efforts in background checks must be grounded in due process and proper judicial oversight, which I believe we have here in Connecticut. We certainly support community and first responder mental health training initiatives in every town, from the smallest town to the largest city here in Connecticut. We have seen a marked increase in crisis-related calls. Even in Darien, we did a count the other day for one of our elected officials. In the 5-year period between 2018 and 2022, we had almost 500 calls just in Darien alone for crisis-related initiatives, which is a marked increase over what we saw years ago. And in that time, it's from age 7 to age 97. So the spread of people that are in crisis on occasion certainly has increased as well. We certainly support and welcome the 988 suicide and crisis lifelines and those type of initiatives. All police officers know that we are not always in the best position. Often we are not in the best position to offer people the best practice that they can get in crisis. It's all part of a team effort. We welcome that, and we welcome a partnership with our elected officials, our other emergency service providers to do that as well as we can. As the senators mentioned, the need for training assistant at all levels of policing in our state, Connecticut does it very well, and I think you see the results for the most part. I deal with a lot of contemporaries from across the country, and I see firsthand that Connecticut is properly trained and properly positioned to offer professional law enforcement service across the board. So with that, again, I extend the greetings of all my fellow chiefs and let you know that we're actively engaged with all levels of both state, federal, and local government to try to keep Connecticut communities as safe as we can make them. Thank you.
Thanks. Why don't we take, I know there might be some off-topic questions, so can we just take on-topic first, and then we can let the chief go? Yeah.
What will your department and other departments be doing with that? I believe we're getting about 2.5 million out of that 231 million for red flag laws. You mentioned something about training, so what are we going to be doing with that money? The police department.
Well, the exact rollout of how those funds will be rolled out, I'm not 100% certain at this point.
The money is here,
Okay, yeah.
but it's come to the state.
Yeah, it goes to the
And the
criminal
state has
justice
not yet
policy.
decided how.
Oh, okay, so, but in terms of training on the red flag law, I mean, do you think it's adequate, statewide? Is it better in some departments and not in others? And what's the status of training on the red flag law?
This is a fairly new initiative, and there is some discussion and across the board on how this is ultimately going to end up. I do think we have a fairly firm grasp on this as of now. I think it's certainly going to get better. And the point, again, I want to stress on this, red flag laws are designed to keep people safe, no less the person that's in crisis, much less their family members. It is not designed to take away gun owners' rights. It's not designed to keep your guns from you permanently or weapons. It is simply and solely to prevent and protect life. That's where law enforcement on the ground floor comes from.
Thank you.
For the senators, it seems like virtually every state is moving forward with some form of red flag policy. That's correct?
No. I think the answer is no. This money can be used for court-based anti-violence interventions, and there's a short list of what those are. One of those, and the way that most of these dollars are being used, is for red flag laws, but there are a small handful of other court-based violence interruption programs that these dollars can be used for. So we don't know yet whether there are some states, unquestionably, that don't have red flag laws, and these dollars are going to be used for other court-based anti-violence interventions. That was the compromise in the law, was that the money could be used for red flag laws and this sort of small set of other initiatives. But you are seeing a lot of states across the country starting to entertain passing red flag laws. Some states like Connecticut and Illinois are strengthening our red flag laws. Other states have new red flag laws that have been introduced. This is the first legislative session since we passed the bill, so there are red flag laws under discussion in a number of states across the country, but about half states have red flag laws, half don't have them. Our hope is that this money will encourage states that don't have them to adopt them.
Yeah, I would just emphasize the point about timing. The money for red flag laws came to the states on February 14th. Most legislative sessions have just begun, like Connecticut's. And so we're hoping that red flag laws will be adopted, if not right away, at least sometime during this year. There's 17 now that have them, Republican and Democratic legislators. But there's an obvious incentive for them to move forward with some form of red flag law, and they can take a lot of different forms. Connecticut's now enable families to go directly to court, but they put a burden on police, because police are the ones who enforce them when the courts grant them. In other states, police have to be the ones to seek the red flag protections. In other words, to separate a person from the gun, police have to apply, which puts yet additional burdens on police. So there can be a lot of different forms. The standard of proof may be different. Remember, these red flag laws do not take guns away from people. They separate people from those guns for a limited period of time initially. Then there is the possibility of a full hearing on the facts, and then for another limited period of time, if the court decides, the guns can be continued to be separated from people. So there is very strong due process built into most of these laws, but they may involve different time periods, different standards of proof, and the crisis intervention means can involve separate courts, different procedures. Basically, the idea is separating people from guns when they're dangerous to themselves or others.
So it sounds like what you're saying, though, is generally speaking, the $231 million that's been awarded across the country has gone to support things that were in existence prior to, programs that existed prior to the passage of the law. And we're not yet seeing a situation where new states are adopting.
Well, we don't. States have not decided how to use the money yet, but they have to use it for crisis intervention. So it's not in most of the states. In fact, we're only in March now. The money went out in February. My guess is few, if any, states have actually begun spending the money. but they have to spend it on crisis intervention.
Yeah, I think it's just too early to, again, this bill was passed after state legislative sessions had wrapped last year. We're in the middle of those sessions now. We just don't know yet whether states are going to be adopting new laws. We certainly see some evidence of that, but we don't know yet.
You had a question?
Yes. So, getting back to the red flag laws again, I know former President Trump was actually in favor of red flag laws with absolutely no hearing. So this actually would have a little bit more due process than what he initially proposed, and it seems like gun owners' rights would be protected along with protecting the community. Is that really the goal here?
Absolutely. There has to be due process. You can't just take away guns. You can't just march into somebody's house and seize a gun. There has to be due process. People are entitled to go to court initially and contest sworn affidavits or requests to a judge, and then there's the possibility of a full court hearing after 10 days or 2 weeks or an even more limited amount of time, like a week. So due process is built into red flag laws wherever they exist. And I don't know that Donald Trump, I'm not sure what his position eventually was.
He made a statement while at a table with Pelosi saying that he wasn't really in favor of due process, just grab them. So that was.
Well, that's not the law in any state.
Yeah, well, I mean, I was at a meeting with Donald Trump that was televised in which he said he wanted to get rid of assault weapons and universal background checks, and a day later he wasn't for that any longer. I will just say this about due process. This was one of the most important things that we negotiated in this bill. It was really important to all of us, but in particular our Republican partners, that there be due process requirements in the bill. So there is a specific section of this bill that says if you're going to use these dollars for red flag laws, you have to have due process, and our bill actually spells out what that due process looks like. Senator Blumenthal was very involved in that section of the bill.
About due process, so in Connecticut, they just recently changed the law so that a seizure is indefinite, but you have the right to petition a court every 6 months to have your firearms returned to you. That was change just recently made. Do you think we've had enough experience with it to determine if that indeed is providing due process? That change? I mean,
Well,
research on it.
Yeah.
You know, that sounds like due process to me. You have a right every 6 months.
We don't know if anybody's gotten their firearms back. I mean,
Well,
that's one of the things
we
that's
don't,
difficult
but
about this law.
I have a lot of confidence that our police are going to use this measure judiciously, and also that courts will hear petitions whenever they're made. And people have a right to say, you know, you separated me, you took my guns, facts have changed, or you were wrong, and here's the reason. And judges have an obligation to give that person a hearing, to consider all the evidence, and return the guns.
Senator Blumenthal, what is your reaction to the Trump indictment, the news that came down?
Do we have any more? Can we just make sure that we have, so I just want to make sure before we let the chief go, do we have any other on-topic questions?
No, but if
Well,
they were
let's-
looking for an example, it would, Cornell Lewis of Bloomfield, Connecticut actually had his firearms returned under the law, so the law for due process does work.
Thanks.
Thank you.
All right, go ahead, sorry.
I was going to ask your reaction and response to Trump's indictment, the indictment that came down yesterday.
Well, let me just say, no person is above the law, and every violation of law should be pursued. The justice system has an obligation to follow the facts and law, as has happened here. A grand jury has indicted Donald Trump after an intensive investigation lasting many months. That grand jury is composed of everyday Americans who have heard abundant evidence, and now the charges will be determined by the legal process. Donald Trump will have the rights of any criminal defendant the justice system will presume him innocent until there's a verdict of guilt. And I would just say, more generally, the attacks on the prosecutor here, made by some of former President Trump's allies, have been vile and unfounded, actually viciously false, sometimes anti-Semitic, more than just a dog whistle, and a grave disservice, indeed damage, to our criminal justice system. My hope is that there will be no political intimidation, such as has been threatened by the House committees in terms of seeking evidence or documents from the prosecutor in New York, and that there will be no incitement or invitation to violence. We've seen some of it from the president, former president. Former President Trump has, in effect, said that these charges would be death and destruction. He has appeared in Waco with images of January 6th on the screen in back of him. And these kinds of invitations or incitements to violence ought to be condemned. But most important, make no mistake, it isn't the prosecutor who has made the decision to bring charges against Donald Trump. It is a grand jury, lawfully impaneled, involving everyday Americans who have decided that the legal process should hold Donald Trump accountable. That legal process will be time-consuming and hard-fought over months, maybe more than a year. And we will have more evidence. We'll know what the charges are on Tuesday. We don't yet. And Donald Trump will have all the rights of every American. But no American is above the law.
So, listen, it's a serious decision to charge a former president with a crime. And I understand that every political figure in this country is going to be asked for their opinion. I just don't think it's our job to take sides in a criminal matter. Senator Blumenthal's right. Donald Trump's going to be presumed that he's innocent until he's proven guilty in a court of law. He's going to have every right that a defendant has. But we haven't even seen the charges yet. So I think it's pretty incredible that some of my colleagues believe they're clairvoyant and they can judge the president's innocence before they've even seen what the charges are. And my decision is going to be to let the legal process take its court and to not render my political opinion on a legal process. But lastly, I do also share Senator Blumenthal's concern about the potential for violence. I mean, this president has a history of riling up his supporters to engage in mass level violence when he thinks that he's been wronged. And the way in which some of his supporters are talking about these charges makes me very worried that we are going to see violence against the law enforcement officers in New York, against individuals who support these charges. I just think this is a really important moment. And I think everybody who supports the president needs to be pretty careful about the words that they use so that we don't have another January 6th on our hands.
Yeah, just to add one note of caution, there's no evidence yet that there are going to be mass protests or demonstrations on Tuesday when the president appears for arraignment. There's no indication that there will be protests, not to mention violence. And I can tell you, having talked to some of my colleagues, I'm a member of the Homeland Security Committee, there are no indications that there's a serious threat of interference physically with the process on Tuesday. But these statements are deeply dangerous. They could get somebody killed, particularly law enforcement, as happened on January 6th. So this language about death and destruction, about taking our nation back, ought to be avoided by anybody who has respect for law enforcement or the criminal justice process.
How do you see it going if the rhetoric is not toned down? If the rhetoric is not toned down and the former president and his allies keep talking in this way, I mean, what is there to be done to safeguard against that kind of outcome?
I think Donald Trump's counsel will be responsible for advising him. We're not in that position. He's going to harm his own interests in court if he persists. And of course, he took back, in effect, disowned some of the statements made by supporters. The image of him in one of his tweets with a baseball bat and Mr. Bragg both together, he took down. So I think he's going to be very strongly advised. But the fact of the matter is, law enforcement is ready for this trial. The police in New York are fully capable of handling this situation. And I've argued in that courtroom. I've been to New York, where the prosecutor's office is. It is potentially a very contained area, and the justice system will go forward. No matter what Donald Trump or any of his allies say, there will be a legitimate, fair legal process for him, and he'll have all the rights of any criminal defendant.
But isn't that the challenge, though? I mean, his supporters may not see, they're already saying it's not fair. You know, it's a continuation of the, as they would see it, and you've read some of the social media stuff I've seen, you know, people out there believe that, his supporters believe that he's been repeatedly and wrongly targeted, and this is just one more in a long line of Democratic-inspired efforts to get Trump. Do you think there's any way that that point of view, that viewpoint will ever change? Short of a acquittal?
No, listen, there's no doubt there are supporters of the president who are never going to be convinced that he's done anything wrong, that he's told a lie, that he had anything to do with January 6th. You know, I mean, there are people out there that are, you know, that are not going to be convinced that this president is fallible. So there's only so much we can do here. Obviously, we're not, you know, shouldn't seek to change everybody's mind. We just want to make sure that this process, as it moves forward, happens in an orderly, peaceful way.
And, you know, there will be a verdict. There'll be a verdict in court. There'll be a verdict from history. There'll be a verdict from the American people. And that will speak louder than anything we have to say or anything that appears on Twitter or the internet. And I would just say, finally, for former President Trump to be complaining about politicizing the justice process or prosecutions after he sought to politicize it more than any president in our history is the height of hypocrisy. So there will be a verdict here, and it will convince, hopefully, whatever it is, people who, in good faith, want to seek the truth.
What's your reaction?
We do one more, and then we have to run.
So I have one more off topic, though.
Okay.
I was just asking for a lighter note, the Huskies. Any well wishes for the Huskies before?
We're rooting.
Yeah.
rooting for them. And by the way, just on a even more off-topic subject, both Senator Murphy and I believe that our international students ought to be able to have the benefits of their name, image, and likeness, just as citizens of this country do. And I'm very heartened by the response that I received from the Secretary of Homeland Security, Mayorkas, in the hearing just this week, when he said that there was serious consideration of redoing the rule that right now bars international students from receiving the benefits of name, image, and likeness. I'm hoping very soon, as he put it, there will be a change that will enable those students to have the benefits of name, image, and likeness. But I know you want a lighter topic, a lighter comment, and I'm all in.
Yeah, I mean, listen, this is a, you know, I've been hooked on this team since the very beginning. This is a fun team that, you know, has it all, shooters, big men, great defense. Listen, I love this state every single day of the year, but I really love living in this state when UConn is playing well, when this whole state gets behind the men and the women, especially come tournament time. You know, it breaks down every political, cultural divide that exists, and we all get behind this team. And that's the genius of college sports, is that it's just a unifying force, right? It gives everybody a smile, a reason to get up in the morning when their team is playing well, and join together with your neighbors. So, yeah, I'm excited to watch this team, you know, bring home a trophy for us this weekend. It's going to be a great weekend.
I'll put it more simply. They're going to win. They're going to win. I'm looking forward to the victory parade through downtown Hartford. They're a great bunch of guys and very well coached. It brings everyone together, but most important, it really shows what hard work can do. Hard work, dedication, and grit and guts.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, guys. Thanks, everybody.